Behind every bar in Hong Kong, there's a man who's seen too much. I was that man at the Golden Phoenix nightclub in 1978, and what I witnessed one steamy September night changed everything I thought I knew about strength, violence, and what it really means to be a fighter. Because on that night, a drunk construction worker thought he could humiliate a young stuntman named Jackie Chan in front of 200 people. What happened in the next 6 seconds didn't just silence the room, it made grown men cry. And 43 years later, I'm finally ready to tell you why. September 23rd, 1978. The Golden Phoenix was packed wall to wall with the usual Friday night crowd. Construction workers flush with their weekly pay, dock laborers looking to forget the brutal heat, and young actors and stuntmen from the nearby film studios trying to make themselves seen. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the bass thump of disco music that vibrated through the sticky floors and into your chest. I'd been working that bar for 8 years, and I could read a room like a weatherman reads clouds. Tonight, there was a storm coming. The trouble started early with a man named Chen Wei-ming, a crane operator from the Harbor District who stood 6'2" and carried himself like he owned every room he entered. Chen had been drinking steadily since 7 o'clock, and by 9:30, he was that special kind of drunk where anger and alcohol mix into something dangerous. He wasn't just intoxicated, he was hungry for a stage. Every bartender knows the type. They don't come out to drink. They come out to prove something to a room full of strangers, and they'll use anyone as their prop. I watched Chen's progression through the amber bottom of whiskey glasses and the nervous glances of other patrons who instinctively gave him more space as the night wore on. His voice got louder with each drink. His gestures became more sweeping and theatrical. He started telling stories about fights he'd won, construction sites he'd dominated, men he'd put in their place. The kind of stories that always end with someone else backing down and Chen standing victorious. But stories weren't enough anymore. Chen wanted a live demonstration. That's when Jackie Chan walked in. Jackie wasn't famous yet, not in the way the world would know him later. He was just another 24-year-old stuntman trying to make it in the Hong Kong film industry, working for Shaw Brothers during the day and spending his evenings in places like the Golden Phoenix, networking with other performers, and occasionally picking up extra work as a bodyguard or security for club events. But even then, there was something different about him. Something that caught your attention, not because he demanded it, but because he moved through space like he understood it better than everyone else. He entered the Golden Phoenix like a professional checking the exits. Small nods to people he recognized, a quick scan of the room's energy, positioning himself where he could see both the stage and the door. He wasn't trying to be noticed, but he wasn't trying to disappear either. He was simply present in a way that suggested he'd learned to be ready for anything. Jackie ordered a beer and found a spot near the far end of the bar where he could watch the band and chat with other film industry workers who'd gravitated toward the same area. He was relaxed but alert, laughing at jokes, but never losing awareness of the room around him. It was the kind of controlled casualness that comes from years of physical training and an understanding that trouble can start anywhere, anytime. Chen noticed Jackie immediately. Maybe it was professional instinct, one physical worker recognizing another. Maybe it was the way Jackie carried himself, confident without being aggressive. Or maybe Chen was just drunk enough to see a young, relatively small man and think he'd found the perfect target for whatever demonstration he was planning. Whatever the reason, Chen's attention locked onto Jackie like a heat-seeking missile. And I knew the night was about to get interesting in all the wrong ways. Chen started his approach slowly, working his way through the crowd with the deliberate movements of a predator circling prey. He positioned himself within earshot of Jackie's group and began talking louder, making sure his voice would carry over the music. Stories about construction site fights, harbor district brawls, the kind of blue-collar warfare that Chen apparently saw as credentials for some larger authority he believed he possessed. Jackie noticed, but didn't react. He continued his conversation with the other film workers, occasionally glancing in Chen's direction with the kind of peripheral awareness that suggested he was cataloging the potential threat without giving it more attention than it deserved. This subtle dismissal only escalated Chen's need for recognition. The confrontation began with Chen commenting loudly about how movie people were all show and no substance, actors who pretended to be tough but would crumble in a real fight. The comments were clearly directed at Jackie's group, designed to provoke a response that would justify whatever Chen was planning to do next. When that didn't work, Chen moved closer and started asking pointed questions about whether these movie tough guys had ever been in a real fight, whether they knew what it felt like to face actual danger instead of choreographed pretend violence. Jackie's responses were polite but firm, acknowledging Chen's comments without engaging with their aggressive undertone. Yes, stunt work was dangerous. Yes, they understood the difference between performance and reality. No, they weren't looking for trouble. Jackie's tone remained conversational, almost friendly, as if he were talking to a colleague who'd had a bit too much to drink rather than someone actively trying to provoke a fight. This reasonable response only frustrated Chen more. He wanted anger. He wanted escalation. He wanted Jackie to give him the excuse he needed to turn this verbal sparring into something physical. When diplomacy failed to provide that excuse, Chen decided to manufacture one. The room's energy shifted when Chen stepped directly into Jackie's personal space, close enough that conversation became confrontation, close enough that backing down would look like cowardice to the 200 people who were now paying attention to this unfolding drama. The music kept playing, but conversations quieted. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. The Golden Phoenix's Friday night crowd sensed that they were about to witness something, and the collective anticipation created a pressure that seemed to thicken the already humid air. Chen's challenge was simple and devastating. Prove you're not just a movie fake. Show this room that you can handle yourself in a real fight with real consequences. Jackie Chan versus Chen Weiming. Right here, right now. Winner takes all and loser gets humiliated in front of everyone who would remember this night for years to come. What happened next lasted exactly 6 seconds. I know because I counted them. The way you count the gap between lightning and thunder to measure how close the storm has come. But those 6 seconds contained more mastery, more wisdom, and more humanity than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. Chen threw the first punch, a haymaker telegraphed from somewhere near his ankles, the kind of wild swing that construction workers throw when they're angry and drunk, and absolutely certain that force is the answer to every question. It was a punch designed to end fights quickly, through sheer brutal impact, the kind that works in harbor district brawls where both fighters are off balance and desperate. Jackie didn't step backward. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands in a defensive posture that would have escalated the situation into a proper fight. Instead, he did something that seemed almost impossible. He stepped slightly sideways, changing his angle by perhaps 18 inches, just enough to let Chen's momentum carry the punch past its intended target. As Chen's fist swept through empty air, Jackie placed his hand, not his fist, his open palm, on Chen's extended arm just above the elbow. Not a block, not a strike, just a gentle redirect that used Chen's own momentum against him. It looked like Jackie was simply steadying an unbalanced friend, a gesture so casual and non-aggressive that it took the audience a moment to realize They were watching a master class in applied physics. Chen's center of gravity, already compromised by alcohol and the wild swing he'd committed to, shifted past the point of recovery. Jackie's hand on his arm didn't push or pull. It simply guided Chen's own force in a direction where balance was impossible. Chen began to fall, not from any impact or violence, but from the natural consequence of throwing a punch that connected with nothing, while someone gently helped his momentum reach its logical conclusion. As Chen fell, Jackie could have done anything. Could have let him hit the floor hard. Could have added his own force to the fall. Could have demonstrated the kind of devastating techniques that would make his film career legendary. Instead, Jackie's other hand came up to support Chen's back, slowing his descent, ensuring that what could have been a humiliating crash became more like sinking into an invisible chair. Chen found himself sitting on the floor, completely unharmed, but utterly deflated, looking up at Jackie, who was still standing in the same spot, still calm, still present, but now holding out his hand to help Chen back to his feet. The room went dead silent, not the tense silence of held breath, but the profound quiet that comes when 200 people simultaneously realize they've witnessed something they don't have words for. Jackie helped Chen to his feet with the same gentle assistance you'd give an elderly relative who'd stumbled. No triumph, no humiliation, no declaration of victory. Just one human being helping another human being regain his balance and his dignity. Jackie looked Chen in the eyes and said something so quietly that only those closest could hear it, something that made Chen's aggressive posture completely dissolve. What Chen heard in that moment was this: "Brother, we're both working men. We both know what it's like to face real danger for our daily bread. There's no shame in being angry about the things that are hard in life, but there's also no need to make things harder for each other." Chen's response was what broke the room. This 6'2" construction worker, who had walked into the Golden Phoenix looking for a fight and expecting to dominate a smaller man through brute force, began to cry. Not angry tears or embarrassed tears, but the kind of deep, relieved sobbing that comes when someone shows you mercy you didn't know you needed. Jackie stayed with Chen while he collected himself, one hand on the bigger man's shoulder, speaking in low, reassuring tones that gradually brought the room's energy back down from the edge of violence. Other patrons slowly returned to their conversations, but with a different quality to their voices, a softness that hadn't been there before Jackie's demonstration. Chen eventually apologized, not just to Jackie, but to the entire room for bringing that kind of energy to what should have been a place of relaxation and escape. He bought Jackie a beer, sat with him for another hour, and left the Golden Phoenix that night as a different man than the one who had entered looking for a fight. I've seen hundreds of fights in my 43 years behind various bars throughout Hong Kong. I've watched men prove their toughness through brutality, establish dominance through intimidation, and solve problems through the application of superior force. I thought I understood violence and its place in the social order of places like the Golden Phoenix. What Jackie showed me that night was something entirely different. He demonstrated that the highest form of martial arts isn't the ability to destroy your opponent. It's the ability to neutralize conflict without destroying anything at all. He proved that real strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about understanding force so completely that you can redirect it, transform it, even dissolve it entirely. The tears in the room that night weren't just Chen's. Scattered throughout the crowd, other men were quietly crying, though most tried to hide it. They were witnessing something that challenged every assumption they'd made about power, masculinity, and what it means to be strong in a world that often rewards aggression above all else. I realized later that what made those men cry wasn't the technique, It was the compassion. Jackie had been given every justification to hurt someone who was trying to hurt him, and instead, he had chosen to help. He could have humiliated Chen in front of 200 people, could have established himself as the dominant force in the room, could have built his reputation on the ruins of another man's dignity. Instead, he chose to preserve Chen's humanity while demonstrating his own. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking constantly about those 6 seconds and what they represented. I started asking questions of other film industry people who frequented the Golden Phoenix, trying to understand where Jackie had learned not just the physical techniques, but the wisdom to apply them with such precision and restraint. What I discovered was that Jackie's approach to conflict wasn't just about martial arts training. It was about understanding the psychology of violence and choosing to interrupt it at its source. He had learned that most fights aren't really about the immediate trigger that starts them. They're about deeper frustrations, unaddressed pain, the accumulation of daily struggles that eventually need an outlet. Chen wasn't really angry at Jackie. He was angry at a life that required him to do dangerous work for modest pay, angry at a society that measured his worth by his ability to dominate other men, angry at his own feeling of powerlessness in a world that seemed designed to diminish people like him. Jackie recognized this anger for what it was and responded to its source rather than its symptoms. The physical techniques Jackie used that night were sophisticated applications of principles that take years to master. Redirecting force, using an opponent's momentum against them, maintaining balance while disrupting someone else's. These are skills that require precise timing, extensive training, and an almost intuitive understanding of how bodies move through space. But the emotional and psychological techniques were even more advanced. Jackie read Chen's need for respect and found a way to give it to him without rewarding his aggression. He acknowledged Chen's strength while demonstrating that strength could be used for protection rather than destruction. He transformed a moment of potential humiliation into an opportunity for human connection. The story of what happened at the Golden Phoenix that night spread through Hong Kong's entertainment industry like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Within days, everyone connected to Shaw Brothers Studios had heard some version of the event. Within weeks, it had become part of the folklore that surrounded Jackie's emerging reputation as someone special in the world of action films. But the impact went beyond industry gossip. The Golden Phoenix itself changed after that night. The atmosphere became less aggressive, more welcoming. Other potential confrontations were resolved more peacefully, as if Jackie's demonstration had shown everyone a better way to handle conflict. Patrons started treating each other with more respect, more awareness that everyone in the room was fighting their own battles and didn't need additional ones created artificially. Chen became a regular at the Golden Phoenix, but as a protector rather than a provocateur. He started intervening when he saw other drunk patrons heading toward confrontations, using his size and presence to de-escalate situations before they could develop into violence. He had learned from Jackie that real strength meant taking care of others rather than proving dominance over them. For Jackie, that night became a defining moment in his understanding of what it meant to be a martial artist in the modern world. He realized that his skills weren't just for entertainment or self-protection. They were tools for creating peace in situations where peace seemed impossible. This philosophy would later influence his approach to action choreography, his choice of film roles, and his public persona as someone who used violence in movies to ultimately promote messages of harmony and understanding. What I witnessed that September night taught me that true martial arts mastery isn't about fighting better than everyone else. It's about not needing to fight at all. Jackie demonstrated that when you truly understand violence, When you've trained your body and mind to handle any physical confrontation, you gain the freedom to choose nonviolence from a position of strength rather than weakness. Most people avoid fights because they're afraid of getting hurt or losing. Jackie avoided fights because he understood that winning them was easy, but that winning them without destroying your opponent's dignity or humanity was the real challenge. He had reached a level of skill where the physical aspects of conflict were no longer interesting to him. The interesting part was the human element, how to preserve everyone's dignity while ensuring everyone's safety. The men who cried that night weren't crying because Jackie was strong. They were crying because he was kind. They were witnessing someone with the power to destroy, choosing instead to protect. Someone with every justification for cruelty, choosing instead compassion. In a world that had taught them that strength and kindness were opposites, Jackie showed them they could be the same thing. I retired from bartending in 2010, but I still think about that night regularly. I've watched Jackie Chan become one of the most famous action stars in the world, seen him perform stunts that defy physics, and create fight scenes that blend humor with incredible athleticism. But nothing he's ever done on screen has impressed me as much as those 6 seconds at the Golden Phoenix, when he turned a potential fight into a moment of human connection. In recent years, as I've watched the world seem to grow more divided and more willing to solve problems through conflict rather than understanding, I find myself telling this story more often. Not because I think everyone needs to learn martial arts, but because I think everyone needs to understand that there are always alternatives to the first angriest response to any situation. Jackie showed us that night that the strongest thing you can do when someone tries to hurt you is to refuse to hurt them back. That the most powerful response to aggression is compassion. That true victory isn't about proving you're better than someone else. It's about helping them become better than they were. The drunk construction worker who wanted to humiliate Jackie Chan in front of 200 people learned something that night that changed the rest of his life. Chen Wei-ming, who died in 2019, spent his final decades working as a mediator for construction site disputes, using the lessons he learned from Jackie to help other angry men find peaceful solutions to their conflicts. But Chen wasn't the only one who learned something that night. 200 people witnessed what it looks like when someone chooses strength over violence, wisdom over winning, humanity over humiliation. And 43 years later, as Hong Kong and the world continue to struggle with questions of power and justice and how we treat each other when we disagree, maybe that's a lesson worth remembering. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes the strongest response is the gentle one. And sometimes making grown men cry isn't about breaking them down. It's about showing them a way to build themselves back up